The violet dusk of Valira Prime cast long shadows across the crystalline palace, perched on the cliffs overlooking the vast, luminescent ocean. Princess Vera stood at the edge of her private balcony, her iridescent skin shimmering with anxiety as she watched the Earth Alliance ship descend through the atmosphere, its silver hull catching the last rays of their twin suns. "Your Highness," came the soft voice of her handmaiden, Aaliyah. "The Earth Envoy will arrive within the hour. Your royal attire has been prepared." Vera nodded silently, her four-fingered hands gripping the crystalline railing. Since childhood, she had been raised to revere the purity of the Valyrian bloodline. Her tutors had whispered terrible things about humans, their primitive biology, their chaotic emotions, their inherent uncleanliness. And now, for the sake of an interstellar alliance, she was to marry one. "Tell me again," she whispered to Elia, "what my mother said before she departed for the ancestral seas." Elia stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. The queen said, "Duty before desire, kingdom before self. The tides of change cannot be stopped, only guided." Vera closed her eyes, feeling the weight of generations of royal Valyrians pressing down upon her slender shoulders. When she opened them again, determination had replaced the fear. "Then I shall guide them," she said, turning toward her chambers. "For Valyra." The grand reception hall of the palace gleamed with thousands of bioluminescent crystals, casting a dreamlike glow over the assembled Valyrian nobility. The High Council members stood in their formal robes, their expressions ranging from diplomatic neutrality to barely concealed disgust. Among them, Vera spotted her cousin, Prince Navan, whose lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The announcement came like a bell through water, presenting Envoy Cale Thornton of Earth, representative of the Earth Alliance. Vera stood straighter on her throne, her ceremonial headdress catching the light as the great doors opened. She had prepared herself for this moment, steeling her nerves against the revulsion she had been taught to feel. But nothing could have prepared her for the reality of Cale Thornton. He walked with a quiet confidence, neither assuming nor apologetic. His skin was a warm tan, his eyes a startling blue against his dark hair. He wore the formal uniform of the Earth Alliance, deep blue with silver accents, and carried himself with the dignity of a man who knew his purpose. As tradition dictated, he approached the throne and knelt before her. "Princess Vera of Valira Prime, I bring greetings from Earth and the Alliance. We come in peace and hope, seeking unity between our worlds." It was when he looked up and their eyes met that it happened. A memory crashed through Vera's mind, her childhood tutor's voice echoing. "Their touch carries disease. Their breath carries decay. Their very presence contaminates our sacred waters." The hall began to spin, the lights blurred. Vera felt herself swaying, then falling. She collapsed on the steps of her throne, to the gasps of the assembled court. Protocol shattered as attendants rushed forward. But it was Cale who reached her first. Instead of recoiling in disgust as she might have expected, he knelt beside her, his movements calm and assured. "May I?" he asked quietly, gesturing to her hand. The court had gone silent. Every eye watched as the human reached out to their princess, breaking every protocol, every tradition. Kyle gently took her hand in his. His touch was warm, firm, not at all the cold, slimy sensation she had been led to expect. He reached into his pocket with his free hand and produced a small flask. "Water," he explained, offering it to her. "From Earth's purest spring. It might help." Vera stared at him, at this human who defied everything she had been taught to believe. Slowly, hesitantly, she accepted the flask and took a small sip. The water was cool and refreshing, nothing like the poison she had been warned of. "Thank you," she whispered, realizing that in that small moment, her world had irrevocably shifted. The days following the welcome gala were filled with a growing unease for Princess Vera. The palace halls buzzed with whispers, The High Council chambers echoed with heated debates, and her own mind raged with internal conflict. Duty demanded she proceed with the alliance marriage, while decades of ingrained prejudice screamed for her to revolt against this arrangement. Kale, for his part, seemed unperturbed by the cold reception from most of the Valyrian court. He approached his diplomatic mission with patience and genuine curiosity, spending hours in the palace library studying Valyrian history and culture. When they met for their formal introductory meetings, he surprised Vera by asking thoughtful questions about her people's customs, rather than simply extolling the virtues of Earth. "I understand the water rituals hold special significance for Valyrians," he said, during one such meeting in the palace gardens, where bioluminescent flowers floated in decorative pools. "Would you tell me about them?" Vera hesitated, unused to outsiders showing interest in their sacred traditions. "The waters of Valyria are our lifeblood," she began cautiously. "We believe they carry the memories of our ancestors and the promise of our future. Every Valyrian royal is born partially submerged in the ancestral pools and will return to them at the end of life." Kale nodded, his eyes reflecting the shimmer of the pools. On Earth, many cultures have similar reverence for water, purification, rebirth, continuity. Perhaps our worlds aren't as different as they seem. She wanted to protest, to list all the ways humans were inferior and different. But the words died on her lips as she watched him gently touch the surface of a pool, causing the bioluminescent flowers to react with a soft glow that traveled outward in concentric circles. "The flowers respond to you," she said, unable to hide her surprise. According to everything she'd been taught, the flowers should have withered at human contact. Kale smiled. "All living things respond to respect, Princess, even across species, across worlds." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Kyle's aide, Mira Elson. Unlike Kale, whose ancestry was purely earthborn, Mira's features hinted at mixed heritage. Subtle iridescence at her temples suggested distant Andromedan lineage. This detail had not escaped the notice of the court, and Vera had observed the even colder reception Mira received from some of the more conservative nobles. "Envoy Thornton," Mira said with a formal bow to both Kale and Vera. "The communication from Alliance headquarters has arrived. They're requesting your response to the preliminary treaty points." "Thank you, Mira," Kale replied. "Please inform them I'll review and respond after my meeting with Princess Vera." As Mira departed, Vera found herself curious. "Your aide, she is not fully human?" "Mira's great-grandmother was from the Andromedan colonies," Kale confirmed. "Does that concern you, Princess?" The question was delivered without accusation, but Vera felt its weight, nonetheless. "On Valyria, bloodline purity is highly valued," she said carefully. "And yet, here we are, discussing an alliance that would blend our worlds," Kyle observed. "Change is rarely comfortable, Princess, but often necessary." Before she could respond, the palace chamberlain approached with news that would test their fragile rapport. "Your Highness, the High Priestess reminds you that the premarital water trial must take place within the lunar cycle. She awaits your decision on when to schedule the ceremony." Vera felt cold dread wash over her. The water trial was an ancient Valyrian tradition, wherein royal brides and grooms were submerged in the sacred pools to ensure their worthiness to continue the royal line. No non-Valyrian had ever undergone the trial. "What is this water trial?" Kale asked, noting her sudden tension. She explained the ritual reluctantly, certain that no human would willingly subject themselves to such an alien ceremony. "It is not required for diplomatic marriages," she added quickly. "We can arrange an exemption." To her astonishment, Kale straightened his shoulders and said, "If this ritual is important to your people, I see no reason to seek exemption. I would be honored to participate." The chamberlain could not hide his shock. "But sir, no off-worlder has ever—" Then perhaps it's time for new traditions to join the old, Kale interrupted gently. When can we begin preparations? That evening, as Vera prepared for sleep in her royal chambers, her cousin Navan paid an unexpected visit. As the son of her father's brother, Navan had once been considered a potential heir to the throne before Vera's birth. Now, he served as head of the Planetary Security Council, though rumors suggested his true power lay in his secret leadership of the Purity Council, a conservative faction dedicated to preserving Valiran isolation and racial hygiene. Cousin, he greeted her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I hear the human envoy has agreed to the water trial. Bold of him. Or perhaps foolish. He shows respect for our ways, Vera replied carefully. Nevan circled the room, examining the ancient artifacts that decorated her private space. Respect? Or a ploy to insinuate himself more deeply into our world? These humans are clever manipulators. Cousin. They seek to dilute our culture, our bloodline, our very essence. The alliance will bring benefits to both worlds, she countered. Trade, knowledge, protection against the Void Collective. At what cost? Navan's voice hardened. Our ancestors would weep to see a human defiling our sacred waters, touching our princess with his unclean hands. He moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. There are those who would rather see Valira fall than be polluted. Remember where your true loyalties lie. After he left, Vera stood on her balcony, watching the 3 moons of Valira rise over the vast ocean. Her cousin's words troubled her, but so did her own reactions. Why had she defended Kale? Why did the memory of his hand holding hers still linger on her skin? Most disturbing of all, why had she felt a strange disappointment when he'd released it? The sacred pools lay deep beneath the palace, in caverns that predated even the oldest Valiran settlements. Bioluminescent algae gave the waters an ethereal blue glow, while ancient carvings depicting the history of the royal line adorned the walls. The High Priestess, ancient even by Velaran standards, stood at the edge of the largest pool, her ceremonial robes rippling like water around her thin frame. Vera arrived first, dressed in the traditional white robes of purification. A small contingent of the court accompanied her, including, to her annoyance, Nevan. She noticed several other members of the suspected Purity Council among the observers and felt a flicker of worry for Kale. When the human envoy entered the chamber, a murmur rippled through the assembled Velarans. Kyle wore the simple white garment provided for the ceremony, his feet bare against the ancient stone. Despite being surrounded by aliens who largely viewed him with suspicion or outright hostility, he carried himself with quiet dignity. "The waters will judge," intoned the High Priestess, her voice echoing in the cavern. "They remember what we forget. They know what we deny. In their embrace, truth cannot hide." Vera stepped forward first, as tradition dictated. As she descended into the pool, the bioluminescent waters swirled around her, responding to her royal bloodline with brightening light. The familiar sensation of the water's psychic touch washed through her mind, gentle, affirming, like the embrace of distant ancestors. Then it was Kale's turn. A hush fell over the chamber as he approached the pool's edge. Vera, still immersed to her waist, felt her heart racing. What if the waters rejected him? What if they harmed him? No one knew how the ancient Valiran biotechnology would react to human physiology. Kale paused at the edge, then looked directly at Vera. Something passed between them, a moment of silent communication. Then, with unwavering resolve, he stepped into the pool. The waters churned, their glow fluctuating wildly. Kyle gasped, clearly experiencing the psychic touch of the waters. But he did not retreat. Instead, he waded deeper, moving toward Vera at the center of the pool. The observers watched in tense silence as the human approached their princess in the most sacred of Valeran spaces. When he reached her, the waters between them calmed, the glow stabilizing into a steady, pulsing light. According to tradition, Vera was to place her hands on his shoulders, completing the circuit of energy. She hesitated, aware of every eye upon them, aware of the significance of this moment. Then, just as she had done in the throne room, Kale gently took her hand. "Together?" he asked softly, for her ears alone. Vera nodded and placed her free hand on his shoulder. As the circuit completed, the entire pool erupted in brilliant blue light, brighter than any in living memory. The assembled court gasped, and even the high priestess took a step back in astonishment. In that moment of connection, Vera felt something unexpected, a glimpse into Kale's mind, his essence. Where she had expected to find alien chaos, she discovered order and purpose. Where she had been taught to expect corruption, she found integrity and compassion. And beneath it all, a genuine desire to understand her world, her people, her. When they emerged from the pool, the high priestess proclaimed with shaking voice, "The waters have spoken. The union is blessed." As they walked from the chamber in ceremonial procession, their garments clinging to their still damp bodies, Vera whispered to Kale, "The waters have never reacted that way before. What did you feel?" Kale's eyes met hers, blue as earth oceans. "Connection," he said simply. "To this place, to its history, to you." She should have been appalled by his frankness. Instead, she felt a tremor of something entirely new, a hunger to know more, to understand this human who defied everything she had been taught to believe. From the shadows of the ceremonial chamber, Nevin watched their exchange with cold fury in his eyes. The water trial had not gone as the Purity Council had planned. New measures would be necessary. In the weeks following the water trial, tensions within the palace escalated. What should have been a time of diplomatic progress and wedding preparations instead became a battlefield of whispers and political maneuvering. Rumors began to circulate through the court, disturbing allegations about envoy Kale Thornton. "They say he's a biotech smuggler," Vera overheard one courtier telling another as she passed through the grand hall. "Trading in forbidden genetic modifications." "I heard he's here to steal Valeran biotechnology," another whispered. "The marriage is merely a cover for industrial espionage." Vera knew these rumors had a source. The methodical nature of their spread, the consistent themes of contamination and corruption. These bore the hallmarks of her cousin's influence. The Purity Council was mobilizing against the alliance, using Kale as their target. Her royal advisors, many of whom harbored their own reservations about the human alliance, brought these concerns to her formally during a private council meeting. "Your Highness," said Elder Thalos, the most senior of her advisors, "these allegations cannot be ignored. The people grow restless. They demand assurance that our sacred heritage is not being sold to outsiders." "What proof is offered of these claims?" Vera asked, keeping her voice neutral despite her growing frustration. "Circumstantial evidence, perhaps," admitted Thalos. "But the pattern is concerning. The envoy has requested access to our biotechnology archives multiple times. He meets frequently with his Earth contacts and his aide." He paused significantly. "Speak plainly, Elder," Vera commanded. "His aide is of mixed blood, Your Highness. Many see this as evidence of the human's disregard for genetic purity. There are those who suggest you should publicly distance yourself from Envoy Thornton. Perhaps even reconsider the marriage entirely." Vera dismissed the council without committing to any action, her mind troubled. Just days ago, she might have seized upon these rumors as justification to end this unwanted arrangement. Now, something held her back, doubt. Yes, but also a growing seed of curiosity and, most disturbing of all, a reluctant admiration for Kale's unwavering dignity in the face of Valyrian hostility. That evening, she did something unprecedented for a royal princess. Disguised in a simple cloak with its hood drawn low, she slipped out of the palace and into the Earth Quarter of the capital city. This area had been established decades ago when the first human traders had been granted limited access to Valyra Prime. But Vera had never visited it. Royal Valyrians did not mingle with foreigners in public spaces. Such was beneath their dignity. The Earth Quarter hummed with activity even as night fell. Shops and cafes spilled warm light onto the streets. Humans, and the few Valyrians who dared to associate with them, moved about their business. Vera observed them with newly attentive eyes. Humans building, selling, laughing, living. They were different from her people. Certainly louder, more physically expressive, their movements less fluid. But she saw no evidence of the inherent corruption she had been taught to expect. She paused outside a small workshop where a human woman was crafting intricate glass sculptures, using techniques that seemed to blend Earth and Valyrian styles. The resulting pieces caught the light in ways that reminded Vera of the sacred pools. "Beautiful, aren't they?" came a familiar voice behind her. Vera turned with a start to find Kale standing there, similarly dressed in simple clothing rather than his formal attire. He seemed as surprised to see her as she was to see him. "Your Highness," he said quietly, bowing his head slightly. "I didn't expect to find you here." "I wanted to see," she admitted, dropping the pretense of anonymity. "To see for myself." Kale nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes we need to step outside our familiar surroundings to gain perspective. Would you allow me to show you something?" Curiosity overcame protocol, and Vera nodded. Kale led her through winding streets to a small courtyard garden hidden between buildings. Here, earth plants grew alongside Valyrian species, creating an unexpected harmony of colors and scents. This garden was created by a group of human botanists working with Valyrian agricultural experts, Kyle explained. They discovered that certain earth plants produce compounds that help Valyrian species resist a common fungal infection. In return, the Valyrian plants provide nutrients that the earth species thrive on. They're stronger together than apart. "A convenient metaphor," Vera observed, though without the dismissive tone she might have used weeks earlier. "Perhaps," Kyle acknowledged with a small smile. "But no less true for being convenient." Their moment of connection was interrupted by shouts from a nearby street. Instinctively, they both moved toward the sound. Turning a corner, they found a disturbing scene. Mira, Kale's aide, surrounded by a group of Valyrians, wearing the unmarked gray bands that subtly identified members of the Purity Council. "Half-breed filth," one was saying, his voice slurred with intoxication. "Your kind contaminate everything you touch." Mira stood her ground, her posture defiant, though her eyes reflected fear. "I have diplomatic clearance to be here," she said firmly. "Please step aside." "Diplomatic clearance," mocked another Valyrian. "As if papers can make you clean." Before Vera could react, Kale stepped forward, placing himself between Mira and the aggressors. "That's enough," he said, his voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. "Step back." The Valyrians hesitated, surprised by the human's intervention. Then, recognizing him despite his casual dress, their leader sneered. "The princess's pet human defends his mongrel assistant. How touching." It was then that one of them noticed Vera standing in the shadows. Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed by alarm. He quickly nudged his companions, and their demeanor changed instantly. "Your Highness," the leader stammered, falling to one knee. "We did not know you were. You were merely demonstrating the worst of Valyrian prejudice," Vera said coldly, stepping forward to stand beside Kale. "Is this how we show our superiority? Through drunken harassment in darkened streets?" The Purity Council members retreated with hasty, embarrassed bows. When they were gone, Mira released a shaky breath. "Thank you, both of you. That could have turned ugly." "Are you hurt?" Kale asked, concern evident in his voice. "Just my pride," Mira assured him. "It's not the first time I've encountered such attitudes. Being of mixed heritage makes you a target in many worlds, not just Valera." Vera studied Mira with new eyes. "You've faced this your entire life?" "Since I was old enough to understand why some people looked at me differently," Mira confirmed. "My family taught me to stand tall anyway, to be proud of all the parts of my heritage." She hesitated, then added, "If I may speak freely, Your Highness, it's why I believe so strongly in this alliance. Every time worlds come together, it gets a little easier for people like me to exist without apology." Her words struck Vera deeply. She had never considered how her own prejudices, and those of her people, affected individuals caught between worlds. Had her own mother, in arranging this alliance marriage before her passing, seen something that Vera was only now beginning to understand? As they escorted Mira back to the diplomatic quarters, the three were unaware of being observed from the shadows. A hooded figure watched their interaction, then slipped away to report to Nevan. The princess had been seen defending humans against loyal Velerans. The Purity Council would need to accelerate their plans. The following morning, Vera received an unexpected summons to the Chamber of Elders, where she found the High Council assembled in their formal capacity. Her cousin Nevan stood at the center of the chamber, his expression grave. "Princess Vera," he announced formally, "disturbing evidence has come to light regarding Envoy Thornton's activities on Valera Prime. We have reason to believe he is engaged in prohibited biotech trading, possibly with the intent to undermine Valeran genetic sovereignty." Vera kept her expression neutral, though her mind raced. "What evidence do you present, Counselor?" Nevan gestured, and an aide brought forward a data crystal. "Communications intercepted between the envoy and unknown parties, discussing genetic material and integration protocols. Additionally, we have witness testimony placing him in restricted areas of the city where known biotech smugglers operate." The restricted area had been the garden Kale had shown her. Vera realized this was a fabrication, likely constructed after their excursion had been observed. "These are serious allegations," she acknowledged. "Envoy Thornton should be given an opportunity to address them directly." "Of course, Your Highness," Nevan agreed with false graciousness. "We have already requested his presence. However, given the gravity of these concerns, the Council recommends you publicly distance yourself from the envoy until this matter is resolved. A statement denouncing any involvement in his alleged activities would reassure the people of your commitment to Valeran purity." It was a trap, expertly laid. If she defended Kale, she would appear to be putting alien interests above her people's. If she denounced him, the alliance would crumble, and with it, any hope for the benefits it promised, benefits her mother had deemed worth the controversial marriage. "I will consider the Council's recommendation carefully," she said at last. "Until then, let us proceed with caution and fairness. I would hear Envoy Thornton's response to these charges before making any public statement." Nevan's eyes narrowed slightly. He had expected an easier victory, but he bowed in acquiescence. "As you wish, Your Highness. The envoy will be summoned immediately." But when royal guards were sent to the diplomatic quarters, they returned with troubling news. Neither Kale nor Mira could be found. Their quarters showed signs of hasty departure, with communications equipment left behind, suggesting they had not left voluntarily. "It seems the envoy has fled rather than face questioning," Nevan announced triumphantly to the reconvened council. "Surely this confirms his guilt." Vera felt cold dread settling in her stomach. Kyle would not have fled. Not the man who had faced the water trial with unwavering courage. Not the man who had stood against Purity Council thugs to defend his aid. Something was wrong. "Or it suggests foul play," she countered. Envoy Thornton is an official representative of the Earth Alliance. His disappearance is a diplomatic incident that must be investigated thoroughly. Of course, Your Highness. Nivan agreed too readily. I've already initiated a planetary security search. If the envoy is on Valira Prime, we will find him. His confidence sent a chill through Vera. He knew exactly where Kale was, because he had arranged his disappearance. That night, as Vera paced her chambers, a soft chime announced a visitor. To her surprise, it was Aaliyah, her handmaiden, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Your Highness, Elia whispered, glancing over her shoulder. Someone seeks audience with you. She says it concerns Envoy Thornton. Moments later, a hooded figure was ushered into Vera's private study. When the hood fell back, it revealed the face of a young Valiran woman Vera didn't recognize. Forgive the intrusion, Your Highness, the woman said, bowing deeply. My name is Lyra. I work in the lower levels of the palace archives. And I am also a member of the Purity Council. She hurried on as Vera's expression hardened. Or I was, until today. What they've done, what they're planning, I cannot be part of it. Explain yourself, Vera commanded. The council has taken the envoy and his aide, Lyra confessed. They're being held in the Temple of Ancestral Purity beneath the Old City. Councillor Nevan plans to use them to disrupt the Alliance. How? Vera demanded. The aide, Mira, is to be publicly executed for genetic treason. They will force the envoy to attempt rescue, then kill him when he violates sacred temple ground. The deaths will be blamed on their own actions, and the Alliance will collapse in the diplomatic crisis that follows. Lyra's voice shook. I joined the council because I believe in preserving our heritage, not in murder and deception. Vera's mind raced. The Temple of Ancestral Purity was an ancient site, predating even the palace. Once the center of Valiran religious life, it had fallen into disuse centuries ago when more moderate practices had replaced the harsh purity rituals of the past. That the council used it as their headquarters was both fitting and troubling. Why should I believe you? Vera asked the young archivist. Lyra reached into her robe and withdrew a small data crystal. This contains the council's communications about the plot, including Councillor Nevan's direct orders. It also has the temple access codes. I stole it from the archive's restricted section. She placed it on the table between them. I believe in Valiran purity, Your Highness, but not at the cost of our honor. After Lyra departed, Vera studied the data crystal's contents, confirming the archivist's claims. The evidence of her cousin's treachery was irrefutable. Now, she faced the most difficult decision of her life: adhere to protocol, inform the High Council, and watch as bureaucracy and political maneuvering likely doomed Kale and Mira, or defy convention and act directly, risking her standing and possibly her life. The answer came to her not as a thought, but as a feeling. The same feeling she had experienced in the sacred pool when Kale had taken her hand. Connection, purpose, truth. She would need help, but she couldn't risk involving anyone who might alert Nevan. With grim determination, she opened a secure channel to the Earth Alliance ship still in orbit around Valira Prime. It was time to make her choice. Deep beneath the ancient city, in chambers carved from the living rock millennia ago, the Temple of Ancestral Purity hummed with activity for the first time in centuries. Members of the Purity Council, wearing ceremonial masks that harkened back to a harsher time in Valiran history, prepared for a ritual that would, in their minds, cleanse the stain of foreign influence from their world. In the central chamber, with its vaulted ceiling displaying constellations as they had appeared when the temple was built, Mira knelt at the center of a ceremonial circle. Her hands were bound with energy restraints that glowed with a sickly yellow light. Despite her situation, she held herself with dignity, her eyes defiant as she watched the masked figures move about the chamber. Nearby, in a smaller antechamber, Cale Thornton fought against his own restraints. Unlike Mira, he was physically bound, the Velerans taking no chances with the stronger human physiology. A masked guard stood watch, fingering a ceremonial knife with obvious anticipation. "Your plan won't work," Cale told the guard calmly. "The Earth Alliance won't blame Valera for the actions of extremists. They'll investigate, they'll learn the truth, and they'll still seek peaceful relations." The guard tilted his head. "Perhaps, but the princess will have no choice but to denounce you once you've violated our most sacred laws. The people would accept nothing less, and without her support, your precious alliance will wither before it blooms." The door to the antechamber slid open, revealing Nevin. He had dispensed with the ceremonial mask, preferring Cale to see his face, to know exactly who had orchestrated his downfall. "Comfortable, Envoy Thornton?" he asked with mock concern. "I've had better accommodations," Cale replied evenly. "But I've had worse. The mining colonies of Titan were particularly unpleasant." Nevan approached, studying the human with undisguised contempt. "Do you know why you're here, human? Not just here in this temple, but here on our world." "I'm here to help forge an alliance that will benefit both our peoples," Cale said. "You're here because our leadership has grown weak," Nevan spat. "Because my aunt, the late queen, lost her nerve in her final years. She feared the Void Collective, feared isolation, feared change, unless it was change that diluted our very essence." He circled Cale like a predator. "But there are those of us who remember the old ways, who know that Valyrian strength comes from Valyrian purity." "Isolation is a slow death," Cale argued. "The Void Collective grows stronger every cycle. They've already consumed 3 systems on the edge of your territory. Alone, Valyria cannot stand against them. We stood alone for 10,000 years before your kind crawled out of your oceans," Nevan retorted. "We will stand for 10,000 more after your Earth has been forgotten." A commotion from the main chamber interrupted their exchange. Nevin's communicator chimed, and a panicked voice came through. "Counselor, intruders have breached the outer temple." Nevan's eyes widened. "Impossible!" "The temple's location is known only to council members." He grabbed Cale by the collar. "Your people. Did you manage to signal them somehow?" "I'm as surprised as you are," Kyle admitted truthfully. Cursing, Nevin rushed from the antechamber, leaving Cale with his guard. Minutes passed, filled with the distant sounds of energy weapons and shouting. Then silence fell, heavy and expectant. The antechamber door slid open once more. The guard raised his weapon, then froze in shock. Princess Vera stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 humans in Earth Alliance tactical gear. She had exchanged her royal finery for a simple combat suit that hugged her slender frame. In her hand, she held an ancient Velarin energy staff, a royal weapon that had not been used in generations. "Your Highness," the guard stammered, falling to his knees. "I was only following orders. The counselor said—" "Leave," Vera commanded, her voice cold. "Now!" The guard fled, pushing past her and the Alliance soldiers. Vera approached Cale, her eyes taking in his restraints and the bruises on his face where he had clearly been struck. "You came for me," Cale said softly, wonder in his voice. "Did you doubt I would?" she asked, using the energy staff to sever his restraints. "I hoped," he admitted. "But I would have understood if duty had demanded otherwise." "I'm beginning to understand that true duty is more complex than blind obedience to tradition," Vera replied, helping him to his feet. "Where is Mira?" "The main chamber. They're planning some kind of ritual execution." Vera's expression hardened. "Not anymore." They moved swiftly through the temple corridors, the Alliance soldiers taking point. Vera had contacted the Earthship after reviewing Lyra's evidence, explaining the situation and requesting their help in a rescue operation. As princess, she had the authority to grant them temporary landing rights without council approval, a royal prerogative she had never exercised until now. When they reached the main chamber, a tense standoff was underway. Several council members lay unconscious on the floor, subdued by the Alliance team's stun weapons. Others, including Navan, had taken defensive positions around the ceremonial circle, where Mira remained bound. The council members had drawn ancient Valyrian weapons, ceremonial, but still deadly. "Release her," Vera commanded, stepping into the chamber. Navan's face contorted with rage. "You betray your people for these creatures. You bring armed aliens into our most sacred temple. You are no true daughter of Valyria. I bring justice to those who would commit murder in the name of tradition," Vera countered. "I uphold the true values of Valyria, honor, truth, and progress, against those who would drag us back into the darkness of ignorance and fear." "Fine words from one who would pollute our bloodline," Navan snarled. "The council will never recognize a union with this human. The people will revolt when they learn you've brought Earth soldiers onto sacred ground. Then, let them judge me by my actions, cousin, not by your lies." Vera stepped forward, moving past the Alliance soldiers, placing herself between them and the council members. "I am Vera, daughter of Queen Larissa, heir to the luminous throne of Valyria Prime. I stand before the ancestors in this sacred place and make this vow." She turned to face Kyle, extending her hand. After a moment's hesitation, he took it, stepping forward to stand beside her. "By the ancient laws that predate even this temple," she continued, her voice ringing with authority, "I claim the right of blood bond with this man, Cale Thornton of Earth. Our lives, our fates, our very essence, joined as one from this moment forward." A gasp ran through the chamber. The blood bond was the oldest and most sacred of Valyrian commitments, far more binding than the political marriage that had been planned. It was irreversible, linking the participants at a cellular level through the psychic properties of Valyrian royal blood. No member of the royal family had invoked the blood bond in over 5 centuries. "You cannot," Navan protested, his voice breaking with shock. "The bond requires the blessing of the High Priestess, the sacred waters." "The bond requires only the will of those who make it, and the witness of the ancestors," Vera corrected. "Or have you forgotten the true laws in your obsession with your own interpretation of them?" Before Nevin could respond, the air in the chamber began to shimmer with an ethereal light. From the ancient channels cut into the temple floor, dry for centuries, a glowing mist began to rise. The bioluminescent properties of Valyrian sacred water, long thought to be unique to the pools beneath the palace, manifested here in the oldest temple. "The ancestors' witness," whispered one of the council members, lowering his weapon in awe. Navan, desperate now, raised his hand, a signal to someone unseen. "If you will not protect our purity, then the council must." From hidden recesses in the temple walls, mechanical arms extended, emitting a pale green field that quickly expanded to envelop the central circle, catching Vera, Cale, and the still-bound Mira in its web of energy. "The purification field," Navan announced with grim satisfaction. "Designed in the ancient times to cleanse foreign contamination from our sacred spaces. It will identify and break down any non-Valyrian genetic material within its radius." He looked at Cale with hatred. "A painful death for humans, I'm told, and for half-breeds." His eyes shifted to Mira. The field intensified, and Cale grimaced in pain as the energy began to interact with his cells. Mira cried out, the effect even more severe on her mixed physiology. The Alliance soldiers fired at the field's emitters, but their weapons had no effect on the ancient technology. Vera felt the field's pressure, but experienced no pain. The system recognized her royal Valyrian blood and left her unharmed. She could step out of the field at any moment, save herself while the others suffered. That was clearly what Nevin expected her to do. Instead, she tightened her grip on Cale's hand. With her free hand, she reached out and grasped Mira's bound wrists. "What are you doing?" Kale gasped through his pain. "Completing the circuit," Vera replied, closing her eyes in concentration. The royal bloodline of Valera carried more than just status. It contained ancient genetic modifications that connected the rulers to the planet's unique biotechnology. The sacred pools, the temple systems, the purification field, all were designed to respond to royal commands. But using that connection required training and focus, skills that had been neglected in recent generations as the technology itself fell into ceremonial use. Vera reached deep within herself, seeking the connection her ancestors had once wielded effortlessly. She felt it respond, a resonance between her blood and the energy field surrounding them. With all her will, she focused on a single command: invert. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like a crystal bell ringing, the purification field changed from sickly green to brilliant blue. The pain etched on Kale's face eased, and Mira's cries subsided. "What have you done?" Nevin demanded, backing away as the field began to expand beyond its intended boundaries. "Change the parameters," Vera managed through gritted teeth, the effort of controlling the ancient system taxing her strength. The field no longer targets non-Valyran genetics. It targets hatred, fear, deception. The inverted field washed over the council members. Those whose hearts held the greatest prejudice fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the psychic backlash of their own emotions reflected back at them. Nevin screamed, clutching his head, before collapsing unconscious to the temple floor. With a final surge of will, Vera directed the field toward the mechanical emitters themselves. The ancient devices, confused by commands they had never been programmed to execute, overloaded in a cascade of sparks and smoke. The field dissipated, leaving the chamber in sudden, ringing silence. Vera swayed on her feet, drained by the unprecedented use of her genetic heritage. Kyle caught her before she could fall, supporting her with gentle strength. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "I will be," she assured him, then looked to Mira. "Free her," as the Alliance soldiers rushed to release Mira from her restraints. Vera surveyed the chamber. Most of the council members were recovering, looking dazed and disoriented. Nevin remained unconscious, his features twisted in an expression of anguish, even in his insensate state. "The Purity Council is hereby dissolved," Vera announced, her voice carrying the full weight of royal authority despite her weakened state. "Its members will face judgment for conspiracy, kidnapping, and attempted murder. Those who cooperate will be shown mercy. Those who do not—" She let the implication hang in the air. Turning to the Alliance soldiers, she added, "Please escort the prisoners to the Palace Detention Center. Inform the High Council that I will address them, and the people, at dawn." As the temple cleared, Vera, Kale, and Mira remained in the central chamber, surrounded by the lingering glow of the ancestral mist that had risen from the ancient channels. "The blood bond," Mira said quietly, rubbing her freed wrists. "You invoked it to save us." "Yes," Vera acknowledged. "Such bonds cannot be broken," Mira continued. "Not by any power on Valera. You've tied your life to his." She nodded toward Kale. Vera met Kale's gaze steadily. "I know. You hardly know me," Kale said softly. "The political marriage could have been annulled if necessary. This is forever." A small smile touched Vera's lips. "I know enough. I felt your essence in the sacred pool. I saw your courage in the face of prejudice. I witnessed your integrity when you could have fled, but chose to face accusations with honor." She took his hand once more. "The rest, we will learn together." The dawn broke over Valera Prime in a spectacular display of purple and gold as the twin suns crested the horizon. On the grand steps of the palace, Princess Vera stood before her people, flanked by the High Council, those members not implicated in the Purity Council's plot. Kale stood slightly behind her, as protocol dictated, but close enough that their connection was clear to all. Word of the night's events had spread quickly through the capital. The crowd that gathered was larger than any in recent memory, their mood uncertain, a mixture of confusion, curiosity, and lingering prejudice tempered by respect for their princess. "People of Valera," Vera began, her voice amplified to reach even the farthest edges of the gathering. "For generations, we have prided ourselves on our purity, our isolation, our superiority. We have taught our children that other species, particularly humans, are unclean, unworthy, beneath us." She paused, looking out over the sea of faces. "I was taught these things. I believed them, until I learned they were lies." A murmur ran through the crowd, but Vera continued undeterred. "Last night, members of a secret faction calling themselves the Purity Council attempted to murder Earth's envoy and his aide to prevent our alliance. They did this not to protect Valera, but to preserve their own power built on fear and ignorance. They failed because the true strength of Valera has never been isolation, but adaptation." She turned slightly, gesturing to Kale. "This man risked his life to forge a bond between our worlds. He subjected himself to our water trial. He stood against bigotry. And when captured by those who hated him simply for his birth, he maintained his dignity and his commitment to peace." Vera stepped forward, her voice strengthening. "I have invoked the ancient blood bond with Envoy Kale Thornton. Our lives are now joined, as our worlds soon will be. The alliance between Valera Prime and the Earth Alliance will proceed, not as a reluctant political necessity, but as the beginning of a new era for both our peoples." To everyone's surprise, she then gestured Kale forward to stand beside her, an unprecedented break with protocol that symbolized the changes to come. "Together," she continued, taking Kale's hand openly before the crowd, "we will face the challenges that threaten all worlds. The expanding Void Collective, the resource scarcity affecting the outer systems, the need for sustainable growth. Together, we will be stronger than either could be alone." She raised their joined hands. "I make this vow to you, my people. I will preserve what is truly valuable in our heritage, our connection to the waters, our psychic gifts, our artistic legacy. But I will no longer preserve the fear and hatred that have limited our potential. The future of Valera Prime will be one of proud partnership, not prideful isolation." For a moment, silence held the crowd. Then, from the back, a cheer rose, tentative at first, then growing in strength as others joined. Not universal, not unanimous, but enough. A beginning. As the days passed, the repercussions of that night in the temple and the dawn proclamation rippled outward. The High Council, chastened by the exposure of corruption in their midst, ratified the alliance treaties with minimal resistance. Nevin and the core members of the Purity Council were tried and sentenced to rehabilitation on the outer colonies, where they would be forced to interact with the very species they had demonized. A galaxy-wide proclamation announced the formal union between Valera Prime and the Earth Alliance, opening new channels for trade, cultural exchange, and joint research, particularly in the field of xenogenetics, where the unique properties of Valeran royal blood held promise for medical advancements benefiting all species. In a quiet moment between the whirlwind of diplomatic meetings and public appearances, Vera visited Mira in the medical wing of the palace, where she was recovering from her ordeal in the temple. "Your Highness," Mira greeted her, attempting to rise from her bed. "Please, rest," Vera insisted, taking a seat beside the bed. "And I think after all we've been through, you might call me Vera." Mira smiled. "How are you adjusting to being a revolutionary? I hear the younger Velerans have started wearing Earth-style clothing in the capital as a statement of solidarity. Change comes in unexpected ways." Vera acknowledged. Some of the older generation are scandalized, of course. But they'll adapt. We all will. She studied Mira thoughtfully. You lived between worlds your whole life. How did you bear it? With difficulty, sometimes, Mira admitted. There were moments I wished I could be fully one or the other, Andromedan or human. But eventually, I realized my dual heritage wasn't a burden but a bridge. I could see perspectives others couldn't, connect ideas others wouldn't think to join. A bridge, Vera repeated softly. Yes, that's what we're building now. You and Kale, Mira observed. The blood bond, it was a brave choice. It felt like the only choice in that moment, Vera said. But I don't regret it. He's a good man, Mira said simply. Yes, Vera agreed. He is. Later that evening, as the 3 moons of Valera rose over the palace, Vera and Kale walked together through the royal gardens. The formal marriage ceremony had taken place that morning, a more subdued affair than originally planned, but perhaps more meaningful for being stripped of excessive pomp and protocol. Your mother would be proud, Kale said as they paused beside a pool where luminescent flowers floated on the surface, their glow intensifying as the darkness deepened. I hope so, Vera replied. Sometimes I wonder if she foresaw all this, if she arranged our match knowing not just what would happen, but what needed to happen. Do Velaran queens have precognitive abilities? Kale asked, only half joking. Vera smiled. Not precisely, but the royal bloodline does carry certain intuitive capacities, connections to patterns most cannot perceive. She looked up at him. Speaking of connections, how does it feel? The blood bond? Since that night in the temple, subtle changes had been occurring in both of them, as the ancient Velaran biotechnology worked to harmonize their physiologies, not erasing differences, but creating compatibility where none had existed before. Strange, Kale admitted, but not unpleasant. I feel more aware of you, even when we're apart, as if a part of my mind is always oriented toward you, like a compass finding north. Yes, she agreed. That's how it feels to me as well. The old texts describe it as 2 streams joining to form a river that flows to the same sea. Poetic, Kale observed. Your people have a way with metaphor, and yours have a way with directness, she countered with a small smile. I'm learning to appreciate that. They continued walking, coming to a newly installed section of the garden, a project they had initiated together, blending earth and Velaran plant species in harmonious arrangements. At the center stood a small pavilion of crystal and living wood, where scientists from both worlds could study the interactions between the alien ecosystems. Dr. Alara reports the first hybrid seed has germinated, Kale told her, gesturing to the pavilion. A cross between Earth's oak and Valera's crystal bark. They didn't think it would be viable, but it's thriving. I'd like to see it, Vera said. As they entered the pavilion, a young Velaran scientist looked up from her work, startled to find the royal couple in her laboratory. She bowed deeply. Your Highness, Envoy Thornton, I wasn't expecting... Please, continue your work, Doctor, Vera said gently. We only came to see the hybrid seedling. With evident pride, the scientist led them to a specialized growth chamber, where a small plant was emerging from rich, dark soil. Unlike either parent species, it displayed characteristics all its own. Leaves with the broad strength of Earth's oak, but the translucent, crystalline veining of Velaran flora. It's beautiful, Vera said softly. And stronger than either parent, the scientist added. Our preliminary tests show it can withstand both Earth's variable temperatures and Valera's intense radiation. If successful, it could potentially be planted on worlds previously hostile to colonization. After thanking the scientist and leaving her to her work, Vera and Kale made their way to a secluded balcony overlooking the vast, luminescent ocean. The same view where, not so long ago, Vera had stood alone, dreading the arrival of the unclean human she was duty-bound to marry. "When I first arrived," Kyle said, as if reading her thoughts, "did you ever imagine we would end up here?" Vera laughed softly. "Never. I was terrified of you, or, rather, of what I had been taught you were." "And now?" he asked. In answer, Vera reached out her hand. Kale took it gently, their fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity of a gesture repeated many times. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the moons cast silver paths across the water. Then, to Kale's surprise, Vera began to laugh, a genuine, unrestrained sound he had rarely heard from her. "What's so amusing?" he asked, smiling at her unexpected mirth. "I was just thinking," she said, turning to face him, her eyes bright with humor and affection, "about how much we've overthrown. Traditions, prejudices, political structures centuries in the making. And it all began because you gently took my hand when I fell." Kale's smile deepened. "Sometimes the smallest gestures have the greatest consequences." "Indeed," she agreed. Then, with a playfulness that would have been unthinkable weeks ago, she tugged at his hand. "Come. The night is young, and there's a human custom my handmaidens have been gossiping about. Something called dancing. I believe I would like to learn." As they left the balcony, their laughter mingled and carried on the night breeze, a new sound for the ancient palace, and a promise of more changes to come. In the laboratory behind them, unnoticed, the hybrid seedling unfurled another leaf, reaching toward its future with quiet, unstoppable determination.